There's been a lot of pessimism and disappointment surrounding the Islanders this offseason, but today we give you a reason for optimism. We've got that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could be with us today. And thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. So much to talk about on today's show. But first, if you've got something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, or a topic that you'd like us to talk about on a future show, feel free to send us an email. The email address, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we are happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. You could also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings, including trade rumors, free agency rumors, coaching changes, or anything else that's happening with your New York Islanders from now up until the start of training camp, which, believe it or not, is just a couple of weeks away. So finally, all the speculation about what might happen in the offseason is going to give way to actual training camp, preseason games, and then the regular season, which is just a little more than a month away. So thankfully, we will have Islanders hockey back very soon. So I wanted to talk about a reason for optimism this year. And, disappointment, no Johnny Gaudreau, no Nazem Kadri, no JT Miller, all of that, understandable that the Islanders didn't make that big move for a goal-scoring wing or forward that would help this team improve its 22nd ranking in goals scored. It's something the team still needs, and hopefully it'll happen at some point before the trade deadline. But all of that, there is a reason for optimism here. And the reason for optimism is sort of addition by subtraction. Zdeno Chara, Andy Green, not returning. And, I mentioned this so many times over the course of the season that the Islanders' lack of skating defensemen, their lack of the ability to get the puck out of their own end because guys like Chara and Green in particular could not keep up with the speed of the game, could not keep up with the tempo, and had trouble in getting things done. That was a big factor. Well, the fact that neither one of those two players are going to be back next season or this coming season, and that you're going to replace one of them with Alexander Romanov, which gives the Islanders another defenseman who can move the puck and pass the puck up ice. And then whether it's Robin Salo or Sebastian Aho, or if they bring in another defenseman, you at least will increase the mobility and speed on the blue line. And let's face it, that is something that hurt the Islanders a lot last year. How many times in games did we see the Islanders struggle to get the puck out of their own zone because their defense core or players on it had trouble keeping up with the play, had trouble getting the puck out of the zone, couldn't skate it out because that just wasn't within their skill set, couldn't pass it out because it often led to turnovers and it wasn't good enough to get the job done. At the end of the day, what you had is a situation that hurt this team over and over again. And if you think about it, when you are a defense first hockey team, and let's not kid ourselves, the Islanders have been and are right now a defensive oriented hockey team. When your defense goes from having enough players that can move the puck out of the zone efficiently to having a few weak links on that blue line, you have a problem. There is little room, little margin for error on the Islanders defense when you're only scoring 2.7 goals per game. And if you make a few mistakes that cause turnovers, and Lord knows we saw a lot of that last year, but when you see those mistakes that cause turnovers and end up in the back of the net, you do that a couple of times a game, and you're going to lose more often than not if you're only scoring 2.7 goals per game. So getting Romanov in and then having both Chara and Green no longer with the team is addition by subtraction and addition by addition. But I think the thing about Chara and Green, the Islanders would have been okay having one of them in the lineup, but having both of them in the lineup really ended up hurting the team. And then when you add to the equation the loss of Nick Leddy, and look, Leddy had his faults. Don't get me wrong. He was not the perfect player, but the skill set that Nick Leddy gave to your team with his ability to skate the puck out of the zone, that made a big difference in the goals against for this hockey team. And the Islanders, they fell. They were seventh in the league in goals against this past season. They were second or third the year before. And again, when you're not scoring goals, when you aren't getting the puck into the net, then, even a slight increase in the goals against category is going to hurt your team. And it did. It hurt the Islanders. They go from second to seventh in goals against, and the result is instead of barely making the playoffs, they miss the playoffs. And that, again, was frustrating and difficult, and it cost the Islanders essentially their season. Now, there were other factors. Again, if we're talking about reasons for optimism, the Islanders are not opening this season with a 13-game road trip. So there's a positive there. They are going to be used to playing at UBS Arena. So there's, the home ice advantage was certainly, at least initially, a little bit reduced because, the home team was not that much more familiar with the arena than the road team was. And, hopefully also the Islanders do not get hit with COVID the way they did a year ago. And all things considered, that would make a big difference for this team. And hopefully their defensive talent, their outstanding goaltending, and just the ability to get just enough offense to get the job done will get the Islanders back to where they want to be. Because once a team like the Islanders gets into the playoffs, they are capable of going on a long run because their style of play that they play all year round is a playoff style of hockey. They don't have to adjust. They don't have to make changes. And it just makes sense that the Islanders can go on a long playoff run because of the way this team is built. We have got more to get to on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. The Islanders sign one of their top draft picks, and we have an email from one of our listeners to discuss all that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite. Cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs have only 160 calories, but they pack a whopping 15 grams of protein. And what's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. So the Islanders make a move. They have signed their top pick in this past year's draft, Calle Odelius. He signs a 3-year entry-level contract, and the Islanders have assigned him to the Djurgården of the Swedish Elite League. So no big surprise there. He is going to stay in Sweden, and that'll be, for the first year of his 3-year entry deal. And I like that move. It gives him a chance to play at the top level in his country against top players. He's only 18 years old. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off him had he come to training camp this year. And there would have been all kinds of speculation whether or not, he could, if he had a good camp, will he make the team and what's going to happen? No, it's better realistically to let him develop in Sweden and then maybe bring him over for training camp in a year. So all makes sense right now. Excuse me. Odelius had 7 goals and 23 assists, 30 points in 43 games last year with Djurgårdens. I am not the best at Swedish, but anyway, they're under 20 team in the Swedish Junior League. So, he's staying where he was, and I think there is a certain logic to that, and hopefully it will help his development and get him to the next level. So we have a listener email. This one is from Frank in North Patchogue. Frank writes, another disappointment now that JT Miller is off the table. You talk about frustration. You wonder what Barzal is thinking. He needs that high-scoring winger to work with, and now another big name has signed, but not by the Islanders. Where is the commitment by the GM to make this team better? I do not want to go through another Tavares situation again with Barzy, and I think no Islander fan wants that. In your last podcast, you asked what it would take to get a big name to sign with the Islanders. We've got a state-of-the-art building, so that's not an excuse anymore. I have a crazy idea to possibly answer why the big names don't want to play here. It's that the New York Rangers are right next door with all the glitz and glamour of the big city. Look at the Panarin signing. He took less money to play with the Rangers than with us. Maybe the nice suburbs of Long Island are not appealing to the big-name players. Back in the day, Bill Torrey convinced Al Arbor to coach here because we are not the city. Perhaps that does not apply now. Whatever the problem is, Lou has to address it and solve it soon, very soon. So, Frank, you're right about the fact that whatever the problem is, it has to get solved. The Rangers being so close by and the Rangers being having the glitz and glamour of Broadway and New York City, yeah, I could see that affecting some players, but not all. I think that, like Panarin, for example, if you're given a choice between the Rangers and the Islanders and you like the big city, and you want to play in the big city and get more attention, because let's face it, the Rangers get more attention from the media than the Islanders do, even when the Islanders are winning and the Rangers are not. There might be some logic, but I don't think that will affect everybody. And the fact that the Islanders haven't been able to sign any big ticket free agents in recent years has to be there has to be something more to it. Now, like you said, the building is not a factor. The coaching staff, we had Barry Trotz, who was considered one of the better coaches in the league up until this past season. Is it the style of play? Is it that I think if you're a big time goal scorer, maybe you don't want to come to Long Island because you know that under Barry Trotz, and we don't know yet for sure under Lane Lambert, but maybe the fact that the Islanders play such a defense-first system is keeping some of these players from signing with them. Because if you're look, you see what happened with Matthew Barzal. The year before Barry Trotz came, he was an 85-point player, more than a point a game, and he won the Calder Trophy. He has never matched those numbers since Barry Trotz came. Now, what will happen under Lane Lambert, we're going to find out. And it may be a little bit more open and a little bit more offensive minded. It certainly would be tough to be less offensive minded than it was under Barry Trotz. But to get a guy who, he's going to make his money and his reputation by scoring 30, 35 goals rather than by not, keeping other teams from scoring, that would, I think, be one of the factors that would keep a free agent, an offensive goal-scoring free agent, from wanting to sign with the Islanders. Can Lou Lamoriello fix that? I don't know. But it is a factor in my mind that a player who makes his living by putting the puck in the net would probably be a little bit hesitant to come to the island, knowing that his opportunities to put the puck in the net will not be as plentiful as they were where he last played. All right, we have got more to get to on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. We've got our Islanders birthday of the day, one of the most popular players on the Islanders in their first year, and a tragic story after he finished playing hockey. We've got that and more to come on the Locked On Islanders podcast. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And basically, Saturday would have been the 73rd birthday of former Islanders winger Brian "Spinner" Spencer. Spencer, drafted originally in the 5th round by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1969, made his NHL debut with the Maple Leafs that year, 69-70. Came to the Islanders in the expansion draft in 72-73, scored 14 goals, had 38 points in 78 games. And in 73-74, was with the Islanders for 54 games, had 5 goals and 21 points before being traded to the Buffalo Sabres. Stayed with the Sabres through 76-77, went on to Pittsburgh, and then finished his career in the AHL after the 1979-80 season. And Spencer really was a fan favorite because of his aggressive checking. He was like a pinball out there. He would hit people, he would hustle, and that allowed him to really catch the eye of fans. I mean, let's face it. When your team is winning 12 games out of 78 in their first season in the NHL, you need to have somebody to sort of latch onto, and Brian Spencer was that guy, and he really was a very popular player. We're going to go back and look at one of Brian Spencer's better games with the Islanders, February 24th, 1973. at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. The Detroit Red Wings are the visiting team. Dennis DeJordy is the goalie for Detroit. Billy Smith gets the start for the Islanders, and it was the Islanders getting on the board first. Dave Hudson, his 8th of the year, unassisted at 6:41. Islanders up by a score of 1-0. Then it's our Islanders' birthday of the day. Brian Spencer, his 11th from Lorne Henning and Ed Westfall at 8:43. That made it 2-0 Islanders. But just 57 seconds after the Spencer goal, Guy Charon scores for Detroit, his 11th from Ken Murray, and it's 2-1 at the end of the second period. It was a scoreless first period in this game. In the third, the Islanders add to their lead. Billy Harris is 19th from Jermaine Gagnon and Neil Nicholson at 2:26. But with less than a minute in the game, Marcel Dion of the Red Wings, his 32nd from Bill Collins and Henry Bouchard at 19:07. But the Islanders clinch the win with an empty net goal. Brian Spinner Spencer, our Islanders' birthday of the day, his 12th from Craig Cameron and Eddie Westfall at 19:46. The Islanders win it by a score of 4-2. Billy Smith, 20 saves to earn the win. He was replaced late in the game by Jerry Desjardins, who made 3 saves on the 3 shots that he faced. Brian Spencer, 2 goals in this game. He was a +1, and he had 4 shots on goal. Billy Harris led all Islanders players with 6. Islanders in this game had 30 shots on goal to 25 for the Red Wings. And for the Islanders, this was the 8th win in franchise history. You know, the sad story about Brian Spencer, he was involved with alcohol and drug abuse and was actually charged with kidnapping and murder at one point. His life really, he was charged but found not guilty, but he absolutely had trouble off the ice after his hockey career was over, and he ended up being shot in a robbery following a crack cocaine purchase in Riviera Beach, Florida, unfortunately at the age of 38. So as good of a hockey player as he was, just a tragic end to the life of Brian Spinner Spencer, who was, again, a fan favorite for the Islanders in their first season. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.